And I'm just going to talk loud. You guys can hear me okay? So, okay. They said instead of using the mics, this is better. All right, so obviously what we're talking about is techniques. I'm a Fujifilm guy. I've used every camera you could imagine, but what we're talking about is not cameras. It's how to do this with any camera. Don't get all wrapped up about the name on my shirt. So, first of all is think about this like movie making, because that is what you're doing. You're making a short movie. So we're talking about interview techniques. We're not talking about, filming an actor, but you can take this, translate this to, more narrative work. But in particular, you are essentially making a short film that you want to make it as engaging and as interesting as possible. So you guys are all photographers, so we all know how to deal with certain things. I'm going to try to address the specific issues to this topic without dwelling on stuff that you guys probably know already. So any small camera these days, you can trick out into a full-on cinema rig if you want. If you look at what I have over there, when we get over there, I've got one camera in a cage, one that's not in a cage. So you don't have to have the cages. What the cages help with is that the reason that the cages exist is to hang other crap on your camera. The cage is a support to support other things. That's what the cage does. Yes, it does, it protects, but as you can see, it's just to attach other things, okay? So there are some cages that are universal, that will work with any camera. They can configure. My favorite of that brand is, of that kind of style is made by Wooden Camera, W-O-O-D-E-N. They're part of the big group that is Light Panels and Manfrotto and all that, but Wooden Camera, they make a very good, what they call a unified DSLR cage. It's got a base, has like one standard that goes up vertically, and then it has a top plate. And it's completely adjustable, and you can put literally a small camera, a big camera in it very easily. Or you guys can shop for dedicated cages made for whatever particular camera you have. And the Wooden has some, but the small rig makes them. I'm not a favor of their stuff. It's a little too cheap. That's a personal comment. Tilta, T-I-L-T-A, they are a higher end brand. And then another one is called Condor Blue. It's with a K, K-O-N-D-O-R Blue. And those are a little more heavily built, a little more expensive, but you're looking at a starter kit for a cage, it's like 120 bucks. And then whether you need the thing with the base and whether you need the rods, if you look at the bottom of that camera, there's rods at the bottom. That's to hold focus things and stuff, but you can see what I've got set up here doesn't make use of that. You don't need that. So you decide whether you need that in your price point or not. We'll talk more about hardware settings and stuff. Okay, this is the big topic. I want to tackle it first. So I'm going to show you examples, but again, in this particular session, what I've been asked to do is concentrate on an interview, which is different than a TikTok presentation or an Instagram presentation. In the presentation, you have the person talking directly to the camera. In an interview, you almost never do that. So, let me ask you this big question. If you have to, some of you look older than others, you're experienced, you've been holding cameras for years, you probably don't think about this, but the question is, what does the camera represent? Think about it for a second. It's not you, the photographer. It's the audience member. It's the person at home. Okay? The camera is the person at home watching whatever is going on in front of the lens. And that is very, very important. And that is what movie making is all about, is trying to get you into that location where the actors, where things are happening, and make you feel like you're right there. Okay? So, if you are the person watching Sydney here, she's going to be, we're going to pretend she is As you can see, I set up a thing in the background. She is a world-renowned pianist. She happened to graduate from this college. She's on a world tour. She's back. She's doing a concert in Salt Lake, you know. So she's doing an interview here for the campus to talk about the great, you know, her education, right? So she's not talking to the people at home. She's talking to somebody who's sitting here asking questions. If she was talking to the people at home, she'd be looking into the camera. And that feels completely different. It's a very, very different feel, as I'll show you in a second, okay? But there is a line. There's this thing called the line in movie talk. And the line is, so remember, there's an interviewer, okay, right here in this gap where I am standing. There's a person who's going to be answering questions. In a narrative, in a movie, it's two actors talking to each other, okay? And it's from this nose to that nose, and that is the line. And you need to keep both cameras, or all 5 cameras, or whatever, on the same side of that line. So it's an imaginary line, okay? So we don't have a person here. We're going to pretend there's a person here. And the reason for that, and that's why I say if you look at the picture, right? So you either have the 2 yellow cameras on that side of the line, or you have the 2 purple cameras on the other side of the line. The only time they change sides is if you have a moving camera or you have moving talent. So if she was going to get up during the interview and walk to the piano while we're doing the shot and start playing, then if she changes where that line goes, that's fine because we see it happening on camera and she's doing it. Or if I'm handheld and I decide for whatever reason, while I'm rolling, I'm going to move to the other side. As long as that is in the edit, as long as you don't cut from one camera to the other, you actually see that happen, it feels good. But if you do it as an edit, if I'm on this camera and I'm rolling 2 cameras, and then somewhere in the middle while she's talking, I'm handheld and I move over to this side, but you do an edit, you go from this camera to there and then back to this camera, and now over here, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that is think about yourself at a cocktail party listening to a couple of people talk. You don't magically transpose yourself from one side to the other, do you? You stand there in one place holding your beer, listening, okay? You might move around, but you don't jump from one to the other. And that's why you don't want to do this while you're rolling, okay? You don't want to change the side in an edit. You want to make sure the camera. But generally, there's no real reason to do this because effectively what we're doing is we're recording a conversation. It's a conversation between 2 people. We're just recording it. Okay? That's it. That's all you need. That's the most important thing you need to know today. So now you walk out of that, just think about that. Think about this setup, okay? So the cameras could have been to that side or they could have been to this side. I chose to put them on that side just because the room and what I did with the piano, that's all. There's no magic to whether it's left and right. Except you might want to ask your talent. Some talent, the second camera, maybe they don't like being photographed on that side. They may say, I want to be photographed on my right. So it means B camera, both cameras need to go on this side, okay? And now you have to configure everything else with that. So notice where the edit happens. The edit happens as he's moving his head, right? So he's moving, and then the motion keeps going. So I was a couple frames late on that edit, but you get the idea. But you see the choice of angles. This is very similar to what we have going on right here. Now, so one of the things we need to address, we'll talk about more, but is the background and the foreground. This was in this guy's apartment. All right, we had a bunch of work we had to do. We had to clean some stuff up. We had to rearrange some furniture. We had to put some props in there, okay? So that's one. Here's a similar one, similar idea, as part of a series that we had going, right? So that is the B angle, there's the A angle. Now, this, notice where he's looking. Look carefully at his eyes. He's not looking at the camera. This is the exact same setup we have right here. So here, this is an interview, and the light is from the left, the light is from the same side. It was a very, very minimalistic studio. We didn't have a lot to work with, so we dressed it up as best we could to make it look nice. But you see how those two cameras work, okay? And then, of course, this other stuff is then you have to add in all kinds of B-roll. So in this particular case, we're interviewing photographers. So if you're interviewing a world-renowned pianist, your B-roll would be her concert from London, maybe some shots of her as a 6-year-old getting lessons at home, back to the interview, okay? Here is, where is this one? Now, this one, here's an outdoor one. Come on. Why are you not, there we go. So here's an outdoor one.
I'm a Fujifilm photographer and a wedding and portrait photographer.
So one camera's handheld, it's actually on a monopod. This one is locked off. And again, he's looking straight at camera, so this is not quite the same scenario. Again, he's giving an instructional, he's making it sound like an instructional lesson. He's promoting the product, but he's putting it forward as if he's teaching you how great this thing is. So it's a testimonial piece. So, right, you know what a testimonial is, right? So if you had the dean of the college is trying to get people to enroll, okay? This is the testimonial. The dean of the college is here telling you how great my school is. It's the same exact technique. So it's not quite an interview, but it's also not an Instagram type piece. Let's go to this one. Now this one is a very high-end piece that we did. This is a behind the scenes. So I don't know if any of you guys get to do behind the scenes stuff. Maybe for theatrical productions that you may have at your school, sports, you know, the team's practicing leading up to the big game, that kind of thing. There's the behind the scenes. So this we have a lot of, so here is this 2-camera thing. Notice a very wide shot. Goes into a much tighter shot. Now, this is a choice you have to make as a director, is what is your A camera, what is your main camera, and what is your B camera? Typically, your A camera is the one that you use the most, and then the B camera is sort of like a little added interest. So because the A camera is the one you're going to use the most, that's your establishing shot. So what are we doing here? We're establishing that this guy's a director with a lot of expensive movie gear in the background, okay? Some kind of a studio, very expensive dollies and stuff like that. We're setting the scenario for who he is, what he does. And then we go to the second angle. Now it's a little tighter, so it's a little more intimate, right? We don't need to see all the crap in the background because we already know where he is. So your opening shot is where are we? Just like here we are in front of this piano, and then we use the tighter shots to get us more intimacy. Yeah.
So how I've always struggled. I do a lot of two-camera interviews, but I've always struggled like how far off to the side should you go? Is there like
okay, that's yeah. Okay, that's something I'm going to address. So this, you can see, this is about, and that is something that you are going to have to figure out. So if you look at the background, look at the left side of the wall, the left. You see the blue window on the left?
Yeah.
Do you see how far off it is? Right? That is a dramatic change in angle. But it feels okay. That's about 30, 40 degrees difference. But it feels okay. That's the most I would go. Now, this is a personal thing, and you've seen it, and I've seen it even in some of our corporate stuff and other people. Sometimes they'll put the camera at 90 degrees, and you're getting a profile. The profile makes no sense to me. To me, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I feel like that's way too far.
Because remember, who is the camera? Camera is you at a cocktail party listening to somebody talk, right? If you're all the way over at 90 degrees, you're no longer part of the conversation, right? You're now off on the other side of the room, like just sort of, see what I mean? The closer you are to the person's eyes, the more intimate you are with that person.
So I've even done where I had like the interviewer, whether that be me or somebody else, and then literally like tripod for main camera, and then literally a tripod distance away for that cutaway.
Yeah, so if you can see here, it's about 4 feet away. We're going to light up the cameras right now after as soon as I just finished talking about this, we're going to go over here and look. But there's the other question is, should the cameras be moving or not?
Yeah, and I've seen that too. And
Now,
I don't disagree with this.
Well, so the other, the A camera could be moving, but you got to ask yourself why. Why is the camera moving? Because if it's us sitting in a room having a conversation with a person, if I'm the camera, I mean, do I do this? Yeah, I get your point, yeah. Oh yeah, that's very interesting. Do you do that? No, you don't. So the moving camera is definitely a bit unusual, at least for the main camera, for the A camera. For this angle, you see that happen a lot, but I would do it very little, and you definitely want to do it slowly. You do not want to be making fast dolly moves back and forth. And this could be handheld. It doesn't have to be on a tripod. It doesn't have to be on a dolly. It could be handheld, okay? But you want to be subtle because you don't want to be distracting.
One of the coolest videos I think I've ever seen of the movement is, and this is not political, but it was a Hillary Clinton video. And she was addressing, it was some kind of campaign, during the campaign thing, whatever, right? And during the entire thing, there was like this weird parallax thing going really slowly. And as she got towards the end of the speech, she was like a little more serious. And so the closer they got, though, the camera kept getting closer and closer to her. And it was like a really cool effect. And it was very subtle. And so if you weren't trained in it, you probably wouldn't have picked it up. But I thought it was a really cool effect. And I would love to know what they actually did.
Well, you never know. It could have been done with physical movement. It could have been done digitally. It could have been done optically. So all you need to do right now at this point is just look at the two monitors. Again, doesn't matter what cameras these are. So I'm going to frame her about like that. On that one, frame her about like that. So you're looking here, remember, okay? Oh, I forgot to add our little hair light. Not that we need it, you get the point, So lighting, you guys light any way you want. You guys know lighting, okay? Typically, most people, short lighting works better for most people, meaning the shadow side towards the camera makes people a little more flattering than broad light. So you can see that it gives her a nice chiseling here on this side of the face. Now, backgrounds, this is what I'm about to talk about, is you have to deal with ambient. You guys were in here for lunch, right? You remember what it looked like for lunch? Pretty horrific. Now, if this is where the provost or the dean of the college says, I want to do it in this room, okay, you better make sure you can get on the phone to engineering or whatever and make sure somebody knows how to turn off those lights. Or you're going to have to figure out a way on how to live with those lights. Now, again, now what about locations, right? So you got to look at your location. This room is a terrible place to do an interview. So to fake it for purposes of this class, I pretended she was a pianist. I saw the piano sitting there. So I made that up. I made up that scenario. If it was the dean of the college, I don't know if the piano would make sense, right? Okay, yeah, so where would we do? So let's say it's that, but now you got to think about your angles. So now what you'd probably want to do, let's say it's the dean of this university. We'd probably need, because of how high up that is, do we want the camera down here shooting up like that? Most people don't look good like that, right? So we're probably going to want to put the subject all the way over there in the middle. We're going to put the camera farther back, use a much longer lens, right? So we're not really tilting up, but we have to tilt. But that would be a solution. And then the spotlight could go on that, right? And but environments are a pain in the butt. Like I said, that one living room's easy, but we had to move couches, we had to move plants, we had to take pictures off the wall. So it's just location photography, which you guys do. You guys do portraits on location. So framing wise, right? So what works for the B camera in terms of the tighter shot, that becomes a directorial decision. There is really nothing wrong, to me, there's really nothing wrong with going that tight. I'm fine with that.
Is there a rule in video about headroom in interviews?
Headroom is a subjective choice, you know? I mean, the one thing you don't want to do is that, okay? You don't want to be cutting them off. So I always think it's safer to leave a little bit of headroom. You could always crop it in. Even if it's HD, you can still just crop it in, a little bit. But the leading, where she is in the frame, to me is also important. So our interviewer is here. She's talking to the interviewer. So this camera, you need to make the sense of her eye direction needs to be going in the same direction. There is a technique that I see a lot of people doing this, even in cinema. Now, I'll leave it up to you to decide whether you like that or not. Okay, if I had this shot, let's say I centered this shot. Let's center it. Put her in the middle. I'm going to ask you if that works or not. It does not for me. But I see this done a lot. More in movies than in that. Now remember, movies are creative and stuff. You can do all kinds of things, and it's much, much better. So here's our wide shot, right? Do we want to? That's as wide as, well, this lens goes like that. But sometimes, I'm not a huge fan of doing it. But my back focus is out. Sometimes you see this thing, right, where they show the whole setup. Yeah, I'm not against it, but it's like, hey, we're on a movie set, but we're not. It's the dean of the college, so I don't know, So that's a choice. That's a choice in how wide you want to go. But again, the purpose here is to establish the setting. I'll talk about this, but these guys are very helpful. These are Atomos Ninjas. They're about $600 each. Hollyland makes some that are a little bit cheaper. Small HD makes some. But honestly, this could be a little cheap TV or something like that. It could be a computer monitor with an HDMI in. The question is, do you need good color or not? Or do you just need to see the frame? This you don't need for yourself because you have an LCD. This is for the sound person. This is for the PR person, okay, that's going to be in the room with you, for them to see what's going on. Okay, so, and obviously what I'm showing is for you guys. This one happens to be made by Axoon, and it works. Axoon is distributed by Mac Group, same people that do Nanlights. So they're about $300 for a kit. This is a dual band Wi-Fi video transmitter. Why would you want that? So there are more expensive ones. You can pay over $1,000 for, or actually over like $2,000 for some really pro high-end wireless, not Wi-Fi, but radio frequency transmitters from companies like a company called Teradek is the leader. Those things cost $1,500 and up. They go farther because they're using radio, not Wi-Fi. I've used these on features, and what's good about this is you download an app. So there is an HDMI out, so I'm looping in. I can put HDMI out to another screen. Skip. And CineView, it should, because I haven't connected to, I'm on the Wolverine Wi-Fi. So this generates its own ad hoc Wi-Fi network. So it's identified by a serial number. Just going to wait for it to talk to this unit. And now you can do this. This works better on an iPad. It's the first time I've done it on my phone. I've done it on my iPad a million times. Come on.
So it just gives you another wireless one.
It gives you, yeah, it gives you a picture. It gives you a picture. So it's a nice, easy way for you to, having some kind of connection issue. All right, disregard that. Anyway, it does work. I have my iPad in the other room. I can show you later if you want to see that. The reason for that, again, would be for the PR person that you don't want them standing here. Give them an iPad, tell them to sit over there, you know, and they can see it. So, yeah.
Is there a way to just Wi-Fi it to their desks to get them right out of the room?
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, I've been 150 feet away from this thing, and it doesn't drop frames or anything. So I'm just showing you options. Audio, okay, I'm going to do a specific thing about audio, but right now, let's talk about audio since we're looking at it. Always have two mics. So the best setup is to have a boom mic that's fixed, and I like cables. Again, if you have a really good, there are really good, plenty wireless connectors that will go from the mic wirelessly to your camera. This is a little Rode wireless Go 2 system, which primarily would be for the second mic that goes on the person, all right? And then it goes into a mixer. So I have two mics. I have the one on the boom, and I have this little wireless, right? Because I'm having two mics, so they've got to be mixed. They get mixed, they go into my camera audio input. So these, depends on the aesthetics. They have built-in mics, right on it, there's a mic. So this can clip right on like that. The question is whether you actually want to see this black box on somebody's jacket or not. You could hide it under the jacket, right? So it's like this way, all right? But better is they have an input for a little small lavalier clip-on mic. So this then just goes in a pocket, okay? Or it can sit right next to them. And then you have a little lav mic that sits on there. Now, in the movies, we do not want to see Emily Blunt with a microphone clipped to her expensive gown, right? So they're hidden. But in an interview situation, it's okay. It's acceptable. We all know what that looks like. We're used to it. It's a convention, so it's okay. But I always say two mics. So because you never know when one of them is going to cut out. And they will. Especially the Wi-Fi ones, they can have the wireless ones, whether they're radio or Wi-Fi, they can get hit by some interference, right? You can suddenly get some fuzzing, some crackling. The wired ones, right? Sometimes, if the cable is worn and old, sometimes suddenly, for whatever reason on its own, it might start giving you static noise. Or this might be you may not have plugged this in hard enough, and 15 minutes into the interview, somehow that connection is now staticky and you're getting noise. So you should use headphones. So you would be on this camera, I would set it, I leave it alone. This camera, I would, because this one might be on a slider, or I might choose to zoom in or out, or I might choose to rack focus or something, right? Or in like the interview where the guy had the cameras on the table in front of him, he bends down to pick up cameras. So I might want to tilt down to catch that and follow up. So this camera I might be operating, that one might be locked off, so you want the headphones here. But one camera is going to have your main audio. It's going to be your A camera. You put all your main audio into that camera. But the B camera also has to record audio. Okay? So you could put some kind of a little shotgun like that on here. These work great, they really do. The cameras have built-in mics, but they're really pretty crappy. The reason you need audio on the second camera is for synchronization. Okay, that's very important. You want to be able to get both cameras, you want to sync the tracks exactly one frame together. And with the audio, your software will do that like that very easily, okay? The other way to sync cameras is the old-fashioned way, using a slate. Slate is that whiteboard where they write the name of the director and the project, and you see there's that black thing that goes like that. Well, the reason that black thing goes like that is it makes a noise. It goes click. That click is on the audio track, and that's what the editor looks like. Although now they have time code slates. They actually have a clock on the screen that goes to 0 when you click it. But the important thing is both cameras need to see that slate at the same time. You don't just hold it in front of this one, because they both have to see that thing come together, because they need to see the video along with the audio click. So both cameras, you got to hold it here and make sure they're both seeing it, not necessarily here. The other thing, or you just use your hands like I just did. But where do the hands go? The hands need to be on camera. So I need to have the hands where both cameras see them, and I bring them together. And when you go into edit, you play back one frame at a time and you watch the hands, and right there, that's when the audio should line up. It's very simple, very simple. Just remember both cameras need to see the hands, okay?
So
okay.
One question about the audio. So I have always been fearful of putting audio into the camera directly.
All right, he's asking,
I use an external recorder.
Okay, you can use an external recorder. These days, of all the manufacturers, you do not need to be afraid of that.
Okay.
You do not, okay? 10 years ago, and especially 20 years ago, when digital cameras were first coming on, the camera makers were not thinking about audio at all. And the inboard recording, the amplifiers, the audio circuits were horrible. They were very, very noisy. They had a lot of hiss. And they were just not good at, any kind of subtle variations. Now they're all phenomenal. They're all very, very good. So you should have no qualms about using the internal camera record. Yes, if you're really, really nervous, then use a secondary recorder, a Zoom or a Tascam or something. You could have all of this go into that. Now you absolutely have to have that sync, because there is no visual. You got to have that audio sync on that. So
actually, Premiere is getting pretty good at syncing now, but I was using like Pluralize. I don't know if you guys ever heard of that. It's a Maxon product or whatever, but that was syncing audio really well. I mean,
but most softwares will do it for you.
Yep.
They'll do it for you. But because you don't have that, just in case, the AI that's looking at the waveforms isn't always perfect.
Yep.
All right, let's have a look. Let's go back to info time. More info. I've already talked about a bunch of this stuff, but so we are basically always shooting in some kind of an ambient location, not in a studio. right? In a studio, you guys can set it up and do whatever you want. But in these kind of scenarios, we're in a gym, we're in an office, we're outside on the quad, whatever, right? So you've got to scout your location as much as possible. I cannot emphasize that enough. The first time I saw this room was yesterday. The first time I actually thought about where we were going to shoot this was an hour before the session. But I came early and I stood around and I looked and said, what do I do? Anyway, scout your locations, okay? The most important thing obviously is the backgrounds of where you're going to put your subject, all right? And look at the backgrounds. Look at all the things that normally you wouldn't notice, because normally you walk past them and you see them every day. Now they're going to be on camera for 20 minutes at a time. Suddenly they're going to become obvious. It's like, what is that blinking light back there? I never noticed that before. Okay, that's your job, is to notice it. Time of day. If there are windows in the background. If your interview is at 10 a.m. and you go and scout the location at 4 p.m., guess what? In the morning, it might be blazing sunlight coming through that window that wasn't there at 4 p.m. And now you have a problem to deal with. You have a major hot spot that you've got to deal with. So the angle you thought you were going to do doesn't work anymore. So you either have to think about how to control that or whatever. Also is, are they too bright? Are they too dark? Do you need to shoot something through the windows to make them better? Even in a big gymnasium setting, all right? You might, even with plenty available light, sometimes you need to control it, all right? You use negative fill, you use positive fill, you even add lights as necessary. So the practicals, the typical situation you'd see practicals would be if you were shooting in somebody's office. Somebody's sitting at their desk, okay? And they have a lamp on a table behind them, or they have a lamp right next to them. So that is a practical light because it's part of the set. It's not your lights, it's part of the set. You have to decide, do you leave it on? Do you turn it off? Can you dim it? What color is it? Is it tungsten? Is it daylight? Do you want to change the bulb? Okay? Practicals are very important because you're going to be seeing them in locations all the time. We have practicals here, right? Look up above you. These are practicals. So she's sitting in a pool of darkness. We could have moved her underneath one of those and she would have had a top light. Whether we want that or not, I don't know. But practicals work or they don't. Be careful about bouncing colors. All here, the colors all work in this room. This is off of a short film that I shot. These were the location scouts of two of the locations we shot in. I had to figure out how to deal with those practicals. So I think all of you have worked with LED lights by now. If any of you bought LEDs like 10 years ago, I would suggest stop using them, throw them away. Go use them in your garage or workshop instead. The technology of LED lights have gotten so much better looking. The old stuff really still had green and was missing a lot of colors. It was way better than fluorescents, but it still wasn't that good. Today's LEDs are phenomenal. But be aware that sometimes, the manufacturers have different price points of LEDs. I'm not a snob when it comes to that. I'm not a believer that every light you own has to be a $2,000 light. That's me. But try to at least match quality levels of the instruments you use. It's probably a good idea to stick with the same manufacturer, but again, they've gotten so good that they generally will match. But one manufacturer's 5600 setting might look more like somebody else's 5400 setting, right? So do tests, eyeball stuff, make sure they look the same. Again, we talked about mics. So audio, there's different kinds of mics. The shotgun is the most popular, the long skinny thing, right? The handheld mics, the ones that go on, there's wired mics and there's a wireless mic. The most important thing, what I didn't say earlier, was I said you use 2 mics, but the most important thing is what's up there in yellow, is you have to get close. You have to get close. This thing doesn't work, right? I can't get any audio here? Okay. I had actually some demo audio. We can listen to it afterwards. The microphones have different patterns. Typically, the shotgun mics have the narrower pattern. So a shotgun is designed to reject or minimize noise from the sides. Notice I said reject or minimize. I didn't say eliminate. So it's most sensitive in the front and the back. It will pick up noise from the back as well, but it tries not to pick up sounds from the sides. So the shotguns are very helpful for using on the boom to get overhead, okay? But people think, oh, look at this. It means I can stand 30 feet away. No, you can stand 30 feet away, but the mic has to be close. So the reason you use a shotgun in particular would be when you have a noisy environment. So like if we're interviewing her and she's talking, let's say they're setting up for a big banquet here. And there's clanking of plates and there's the stuff rolling and they can't stop. We could say, could you guys stop for an hour? They say, no, we can't because we have to have this banquet set up at 4 o'clock. All right, you're stuck with that. So the shotgun will minimize this ambient noise bouncing off the walls, but it won't make it go away completely. So get close, get close, get close. This is the demo. I'll play off the laptop later because you can't hear it right now. Get close. The closer you can get to the person's mouth, the better. So you get the mic as close to the top of the frame as humanly possible before it actually gets in the frame.
For shotgun mic, you kind of point it at their chest.
No, you try to aim for the mouth. I mean, the chest is resonating. Most people's voice, resonates in this area, but you aim for the mouth, but yeah. Be aware there's 2 different kinds of connectors. So most of the cameras, most of our mirrorless cameras, the internal connector is like a headphone jack. It's a 1/8 inch or a 3.5 millimeter jack. They're great, they're ubiquitous, they're everywhere, they work fine. The better connector is that one with the 3 pins, which is what I have on that little mixer, okay? Those are called XLRs, and what's good about them is they lock. You cannot pull them out. You have to physically release them to pull them out. The 1/8 inch ones, if I had it on the floor and somebody accidentally trips on that wire, they could pull that audio cable out of the side of your camera and you may not even notice it. The other thing is they can be noisy. When they spin, when they rotate, they can make crackling sounds. So XLRs are better. So you can use an interface to go from XLR from the mic to the 1/8 inch. You can have that interface that sits right on the camera that converts it to the in-camera 1.18 inch. And that's fine as long as it's not moving and it's not where somebody can trip over it. We talked about using external recorders. If it's really, 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 really important, okay, like you're interviewing a celebrity musician, she may never be back to this campus ever again, but she's the star of our campus. We're so proud of what she's accomplished, okay? Get a sound person. Don't try to do picture and light and sound at the same time. Get a sound person, somebody that has just a recorder and headphones and the boom, so you know you'll never mess it up, okay? So I talked about that, talked about slating. All right, we're gonna get into some tech stuff. You don't have to worry so much about resolution of what you guys are doing, especially for this kind of work, but you should think about the aspect ratio. So in cinema, aspect ratio, where we put the person's head matters. Remember, we looked at the framing? Where the head sits in the frame is very important. And in cinema, it's always horizontal. There's no vertical cinema. Now, in a promotional piece, okay, there is vertical. We know that. So how do you deal with both? It's kind of a problem, especially if it's a 2-camera shoot. It's a very, very bad problem. My best answer is you tell your client that you need to do 2 versions. You need to do one that's going to be the primary piece, and you just shoot that all landscape. You do the second version when you compose it for vertical. Now, it doesn't mean you have to rotate the camera 90. If you can, that's great. But if you have a 4K camera, guess what? You can crop that, you can crop the sides off of that, and still have HD resolution vertically. If you have an 8K camera, it's even better. But remember, you can just crop it. But the point is, you have to have the person now in the center of the frame. Both cameras have to have the person in the center of the frame. Or not, I mean, you could crop it, but you are going to be cropping. So that is a problem that is we have to deal with now. It's a reality, okay? A very important technical point. Typically, you guys, your departments tend to invest in one camera system, right? You guys are either all Sony, you're all Fujifilm, you're all Nikon, you're all Canon, okay? But even within a manufacturer's system, different bodies, the different levels of body may have different video functions. And stills, they may all be similar in that, but depending on the generation of camera, the manufacturer may or may not have addressed video as seriously as they did, are doing now. The most important thing to look at in a 2-camera setup or a 3 or a multi-camera setup is the frame rate. The standard frame rate is 24. That is the cinema frame rate that's been around for about 100 years, okay? There is another frame rate that's 23.98 that was created for television. And it's 0.9, it is, you say, well, they're the same. Well, they're not. They're not. Mathematically, they are not the same. 2398 was created to deal with audio issues in broadcast, okay? But if you have one camera that's running at 24 and one's at 2398, eventually, after a couple of minutes, they are going to start to drift apart slowly in time. The video will not be synced anymore. You'll end up having to cut, resync, and start over. Worse, you're going to have a problem with the audio, because audio also has to be recorded at a particular frame rate. So especially if you're having an external recorder, you've got to tell that recorder what frame rate you're recording at. But why I'm making a big deal about this is not all camera manufacturers, if it only says 24 on the camera, that's all it says. Look carefully at the specs and find out, is it 24 or is it 2398? They don't always tell you. If it's got both, you're fine. You know which one's which. But if it only says 24, be careful and make sure when you're mixing cameras that they're the same. The standard frame rate in video is half of, the standard shutter speed, I should say, in video is half the frame rate. And that comes back from motion picture technology, from the way we shot film, the way the shutters and movie film cameras worked. So if you want your video, if you want everything to feel cinema-like, stick to that rule. So at 24 frames a second, your shutter speed should be a 48th of a second, a 50th of a second, maybe a 60th. But once you get beyond a 60th of a second, now it starts to feel like sports video. It doesn't feel like cinema anymore. So be careful of that. Colors, important. Basically, for a talking head like this, honestly, we've got the lighting set up, we have our white balance dialed in, I look, the exposure is fine, I know I'm going to get a good picture. So 8-bit color is fine. The minimally professionally acceptable level in Hollywood and broadcast is 10-bit video. So if you're shooting something and it's going to go to somebody else for post, maybe outside of the college, okay? Or you need to have that talk with post, your editor may insist on 10-bit video, then make sure your camera can do 10-bit. But I'm telling you, for this kind of a setup, you don't need it. You do not need it. You can live with 8-bit. So I'm running out of time. Raw, we don't bother with raw video. The only people that actually shoot raw video is Universal and Disney and Marvel and Paramount, okay? Nothing for TV is shot on actual video cinema raw. Everything is compressed. So I'm talking about the equivalent of the still world, like RAW versus JPEG. Everybody shoots the video equivalent of JPEG, except for the major studios that are spending $300 million on a movie. So don't be afraid of using those compression settings, okay? They're fine, they're good, they work. They give you beautiful picture quality. So you check your cameras and look for what the different settings are. 264 or 265 are what most of them work at. The last thing I'm going to talk about is you may see two different kinds of compressions listed on your menus. All intra is the best quality. Every single video frame has individual compression all on its own. Or there's something called GOP, group of pictures. You'll see this in the menus. And that's a string of frames that relate to each other. The only one that's individually compressed is the first frame in the string. The rest of the frames relate back to frame number one. They're basically text files with very little image information. The advantage of that is they're much smaller. Much smaller. And they're great. The phones, everything has been in the phones has been H.264 now for 20 years. Okay? So that was created primarily for that. And then camera makers started putting it in the cameras for acquisition. It was never designed for acquisition, but it works. 265 is just a better version of 264. But you can do the GOP. The GOP for something like a talking head is fine. You don't need to have the all intra. When you want to use the all intra now is when you're shooting the basketball finals, when you're shooting football, when you're shooting track and field, okay? That's when you want all intra, because every single frame needs as much data as possible. But for very static things where very little motion is happening, the GOP is okay. And then there's this number called the data rate. You'll see that in your settings. Okay, so when you're choosing your compression, usually you'll see a data rate. It can be as high as 400, 600, 700. It can be as low as 25 or 50. So again, for a talking head, ask yourself, what's changing in the scene? Is the piano moving? No. Is the wall moving? No. Is the camera moving? No. The only thing that's moving, the person's eyes blinking and the mouth, okay? And the head doing a little bit of turning. There's very little motion in the shot. So you don't have to worry about trying to preserve a lot of detail because very little of it's actually changing. Okay, so that's our time. If you guys want to talk more, we can talk more over there. So I just want you to listen. I'm narrating what's going on here, but just listen, okay?
This is the microphone mounted directly on the camera. As you can see, it's about 12 feet away, 7 years ago. Thank you. This is the very same microphone, placed about 18 inches away from me, 7 years ago.
I repeat.
This is the microphone mounted directly on the camera. As you can see, it's about 12 feet away, 7 years ago. Thank you. This is the very same microphone, placed about 18 inches away from me,
okay.
7 years ago.
You see, I'm not kidding. That's what I mean about get close. Now, what happens here? So when the mic is closer to your mouth, okay, so imagine it's a lapel, the closer it is, that means I can turn the volume down, right? On the whole system, on my audio system, I can turn down the volume. So that means that only whatever is loud enough for the mic to pick up is actually going to get recorded. So if something's far away, it's diminished. The relative intensity of that sound is diminished compared to my voice. If I move the mic farther and farther away, now I have to crank up the audio. So everything starts becoming equal. So if you heard on the far away, there's a lawnmower going on outside. You can hear the lawnmower clear as day, even though the mic is only, it's like the distance is like from here to here. But you can hear the lawnmower. I had a TV on too. You can actually hear the TV on in there as well.
So essentially, it's the inverse square law.
It's the inverse square law. Thank you. Just like that. It's just like that with audio. It's not the same law, but it's the exact same thing. And like I said, this is a shotgun. As I said, no, people think they're magic. They're not. So the only thing they do is a shotgun is like a telephoto lens. All it does is it goes from here to there. All it does is it narrows the angle of view. But everything that's over there, if I had a shotgun, out there in the hallway, if there was a crowd of students going back and forth right there and I had a subject, it would be picking up the audio of everything happening in the hallway because it's in my line of sight.
So your second mic really is just kind of a backup if you're really...
The second mic is a backup, but, well, the one on the B camera, like I said, is for synchronization purposes only.
Okay.
The other mic is, like I said, one is the lapel and one is these. That's in case one of those just craps out.
Okay.
You could have two shotguns. You could have two wireless mics. It doesn't matter, But I cannot, just always have two, And even if it's only on the camera that's far away, at least you have something,
Okay.
So.
Audio that's being mixed and put into the main camera, are you wanting to set the recording level on the camera like in the middle, and then?
So the recording levels, if you come here and look, so you've got audio meters, and you can see right now what's happening as I'm talking. So this is, I'm trying to figure out where am I picking up. Oh, I didn't actually plug it in. So I'm actually picking up the internal mic right now.
Yep.
So yellow is okay. It's not the best, but it's okay. So you see that line? There's a blue line.
Okay.
Okay, you see that? That is considered where the normal level should fall. All audio devices have that.
Yep.
What you don't want is, notice if I get really loud, if I start talking, you see the red? You never, ever, ever want red.
Okay.
Because red is unrecoverable. Red is 255 white.
Blown out.
I don't care what you do, there ain't no software that's going to bring back detail.
Gotcha.
Okay? So really what you want to do is you want it as all the way at the top of the white and just some yellow once in a while.
So on the laugh and the emphasis during the interview.
Yeah, so
if
you
goes
can adjust
yellow,
it,
that's okay.
right, you can adjust it either on a mixer, well, it would be on a mixer, and then internally is, we have audio settings here, right? So I have audio settings here on the camera. So, but usually the mixers, the external mixers do have better sound quality than the internal, so you try to let the mixer do all the heavy work. Instead of cranking up the camera audio, you try to turn the camera audio down and let the mixer do the amplification and send you a louder signal.